So in Rome, right off the Via della Scrofa, which is just a block away from the French embassy and a few blocks away from the Pantheon, down one of the little side streets that are all over the city, is a church tucked away on the right that you could easily miss. It's the Church of St. Augustine. And inside the church, to the left of the high altar in the left transept, is a very simple tomb. And it's the tomb of St. Monica. And inevitably, any time that I've been in that church, there are always little Italian women, begging St. Monica, obviously, for their children. And it just happened, of course, that this day was chosen for this particular Mass of Thanksgiving for our adorers. And as I thought about it, I'm like, well, how it really is appropriate, right? Monica spent a great deal of time and effort praying for the conversion of her son, Augustine, praying that he would come to faith. And her prayers were not only answered, but he also, of course, then was ordained a priest and eventually a bishop, and of course, is now accorded among the saints. And when you think about adoration and you think about its significance in the church, it's important to remember that, one of the reasons that we have adoration is so that we might come before the Lord and beseech Him for the needs of the world, right? For our own needs, but for the needs of the world. And obviously, over the last 30, 40 years, there have been kind of changes in the way that we have looked as a church on more traditional devotions, right? Certainly in the period right after the council and certainly into the 70s and 80s, there was almost a downplay of traditional devotions, whether it was adoration, whether it was processions, whether it was even praying the rosary, right? So, and I'm not sharing this to scandalize you, but just to give you a sense of kind of the milieu that I dealt with when I went to seminary. One of the first parish assignments that I had, we were getting ready for 40 hours, which was just a traditional devotion that they held in Baltimore. And the music director, myself and the other seminarian that I was assigned to this parish with, he walked up and was talking because we had some things to do to get ready. And he said, something that shocked me. He said, oh, they're all getting ready to worship the cookie god, right? Now, this was a man who worked for the church, who was the music director for the church. And it shows, sadly, what happens when we separate devotion from the Mass and don't understand how integral the two things are to one another, right? What happens at Mass, bringing Calvary and Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, here and now, when the Holy Sacrifice is celebrated, is something that is continued when we spend time with the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. We reserve the Blessed Sacrament, obviously, to take care of those who are unable to come to Holy Mass because of sickness, because of being impeded in some way. But we also reserve the Blessed Sacrament so that we can spend time growing in our love and our devotion for Him. The two are very much connected. The Eucharist, we know, the Church teaches, is the source and the summit of our faith. And so when we spend time before the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, when we come before Him with open hearts, right, we can be drawn more deeply into the mystery that we celebrate when we come to Holy Mass. We can be drawn in to the very life of God. One of the blessings that I've had for most of my priesthood in the first years, and then after I came back from studying canon law, the rectory was like literally right next to the church, so it wasn't really necessary. But after that, we've always had a chapel in the rectory. So the Lord was always there, right, is always present. So it makes taking time with him very easy. And it is a gift because, as Fulton Sheen reminds us, when we spend time before the Lord, we are able to grow in our friendship with him. We are able to bring before him everything that is on our hearts. We are able to come before him and simply be in his presence. The world we live in, we know, is very noisy. It is a world that is often chaotic. And just to have a few moments to be quiet before the Lord is itself a blessing. And God bless you for taking time to do that. Right? How many of you are regulars in the wee hours of the morning, from midnight up until 6 in the morning? Any overnight adorers? God bless you. Yes, those are hard hours, but they're also very blessed hours because oftentimes, there's no one else that's going to be there, right? So it's just time for you and Jesus. Obviously, during the day, things can be busier, but those are times of grace. St. John Vianney, we're told, when daily an elderly gentleman in the parish would always come in and sit in the back of the church and just be there for a half hour or so, never really do anything except just sit. And finally, St. John Vianney asked him, said, Senor, Monsieur Maurice, what are you doing? And he said, I look at Jesus, Jesus looks at me. It's a very simple way of looking at it. But it's what the Lord desires. The Lord desires that we spend time with him. The Lord desires that we get to know him. The Lord desires that we live in his friendship. And adoration also is an opportunity to lift up the parish, lift up the diocese, lift up the world. And Lord knows there are plenty of things to pray for. And so when you go to adoration, hopefully you bring all of that with you. When we come to Mass, we're invited to, when we send up the offertory, we send up all of our prayers, all of our intentions, all of the things that are on our heart. And the same thing is true when you go to adoration. Bring it before the Lord, right? Give it to him. Throw it to the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. And understand that his desire is for our good. His desire is that we grow each day in union with him, and that by his presence among us, we become the light of the world. We become the light shining in the darkness, the light that dispels the darkness that so often marks the world. And so adoration is a great blessing. Would that every parish in the diocese, every parish in the world had adoration, because I do believe it makes a significant difference in the life of the parish and in the life of the parishioners. Because when we grow in our love for the Lord and when we spend time with him, it changes everything. It gives us a new perspective on Holy Mass. It gives us a new perspective on the gift of Christ in our lives. And it gives us the ability to see more clearly with the eyes of faith and to understand that what the Lord desires is that we be his light in the world, that we be his hands and feet, that we take that time with the Lord and allow that time then to transform the way we live our lives in the world. And so once again, thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for your commitment and love to adoring the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament.